I will talk about genetic analysis of patients with inherited retinal diseases in the Israeli population. What have we learned? And on the map to the right of my slide, you can see the distribution of IRD patients that we ascertained for this study. And you can see that they're really distributed throughout the country. As for the distribution of ethnic groups, you can see that the two major ethnic groups in our cohorts, the blue group and the red group, are Arab Muslims and Ashkenazi Jews. Now, Ashkenazi Jews, it's not surprising because Ashkenazi Jews are the major Jewish ethnic group in Israel. However, as for the Arab Muslim group, as Ido already mentioned, they account only for about 19% of the Israeli population. However, they account for 25% of the patients in our cohort, meaning that they are overrepresented in our cohort. And the main reason for that is that among the Arab Muslim community, it is very common to marry with relatives, consanguineous marriages, meaning that people marry with people that they are related to. And consanguineous marriages increase the rate of autosomal recessive diseases, diseases in which you need both copies of a gene to be mutated in order to represent to show the disease. And many autosomal recessive conditions are common among Arab Muslims due to this cultural fact. And among them are IRDs, and this is why they are overrepresented in our cohort. What about phenotypes, types of diseases? So the major disease we see in our cohort is retinitis pigmentosa, RP, 43% of the patients, and this is not surprising. We see it also in other cohorts throughout the world. This is followed by Cohn and Cohn-Rod dystrophy, Stargardt disease, which is a type of macular degeneration, and Usher syndrome, which is a combination of RP and hearing loss. What about the inheritance pattern? So by far, as you can see here in blue in this pie, autosomal recessive inheritance accounts for 61% of our patients, and this is due to two main reasons. As I mentioned already, the high degree of consanguineous marriages in the Muslim Arab population, and among Jews, the existence of common founder mutations in specific ethnic groups. So Jews in the diaspora, before they arrived to Israel, they used to live as close communities which didn't mix with the surrounding communities. And as a result, each Jewish ethnic groups, wherever they live, developed their own set of specific mutations, and which became quite common in this population. We call those founder mutations, which means that nowadays, in Israel, Jews almost don't marry with relatives. It's very uncommon among Jews. However, if a Jew in Israel marries another Jew from the same ethnicity, for example, an Ashkenazi Jew marries an Ashkenazi Jew, or a Moroccan Jew marries a Moroccan Jew, there is not a small chance that they will both be carriers of the same mutation, even if they're not directly related. And this brings to this high degree of autosomal recessive IRDs. As for the genes underlying IRDs in our cohort, the two major genes are ABCA4 and ASH2A, and this is very similar to finding throughout the world in North America, in Europe, and in other places. However, when we look at genes number 3 and 4, here we can already see a difference. At number 3, we find the FAM161A gene, which accounts for 6% of our cohort, while in other cohorts throughout the world, it accounts for less than 1%. And the reason for this gene being so highly represented in our cohort is that when we look at the patients with mutations in this gene, we see that almost 90% of them are of North African Jewish descent. And in this ethnic group, there are two common founder mutations in this gene, which make it so common in our population. And you will hear more about it from Eyal Banin and Dror Sharon. As for the fourth position, we find the CNGA3 gene, which accounts for 5% of our patients. And again, in other cohorts throughout the world, we find it in less than 1%. And the reason here is a common founder mutation, which is very ancient, and it is shared surprisingly among two different ethnic groups, Arab Muslims and Oriental Jews, and they have the same mutation, implicating that maybe they actually have a common origin, something to think about. we use this very unique population that we have in order to conduct very specific and targeted studies on different ethnicities. And this is an example for a study that we conducted on non-syndromic retinitis pigmentosa among Ashkenazi Jews. And we can see in the chart that the two major genes that account for RP in Ashkenazi Jews are MAC and DHDDS. So we can use this information, of course, to provide the Ashkenazi Jews in Israel and in other places in the world with specific genetic counseling and advice. However, Ashkenazi Jews reside in Israel as well as in North America and in Europe. But in Israel, we also have very unique ethnic groups that are found only in Israel or almost only in Israel, and we need to study them in order to provide them with the information. And one example is Jews from the Caucasus. The Caucasus, as you can see on this map, is a geographic region between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea. And many Jews used to reside there until in the 1990s, after the collapse of the Soviet Union. Most of the Jews that used to live there immigrated to Israel. And to date, most of them live in Israel. And in this study, we found that Jews from this ethnicity that have retinitis pigmentosa, most of them have the same mutation in the PDE6B gene. And this enables us now to provide patients from this ethnicity very specific genetic testing. Another example are Jews from Ethiopia, also known as Beta Israel. They used to live in Ethiopia in many different small villages, and they started immigrating from Ethiopia to Israel around the 1980s. And nowadays, there are about 160,000 Ethiopian Jews living in Israel, which is about 1.5% of the Israeli population. However, even to date, most of Ethiopian Jews marry within their community, but very little is known about the genetic basis for various genetic conditions, including IRD, in this population. So we performed a specific study on the genetic causes for inherited retinal diseases among Israeli Jews of Ethiopian ancestry. And we found that the most common phenotypes are RP and Stargardt disease, which is similar to what is found in other populations in the world. Also, the most common gene is ABCA4, which again is also found in other places in the world. But the difference is the specific mutations that we found. Most of them are mutations that are very rare or do not exist at all in other populations and are unique to the Ethiopian Jewish community. And due to this study, now we can provide Ethiopian Jews residing in Israel very specific genetic testing and counseling, and hopefully therapy as well. I want to summarize by saying that over the years, members of the Israeli Inherited Retinal Disease Consortium were involved in identification of over 20 novel genes underlying IRD, which is 7% of the IRD genes known today. And this is impressive because the Israeli population is only about 0.1% of the world population. So we are only 0.1% of the world population, but we contributed 7% of the known IRD genes. And this is due to two reasons. One is the unique structure of our population, which enables us to find very unique findings that are harder to find in other places. And second, because we have excellent medicine and excellent research, and we know exactly what we're doing, so we can utilize this precious resource that we have and use it to the benefit of our population as well as other populations throughout the world. Thank you very much.